Tonight, a huge miss. There were only 20,000 jobs added in the United States last month. That fell short of every single economist estimate. It is the worst number since September of 2017. Out front now, David Stockman, former budget director under Ronald Reagan and author of Peak Trump, The Undrainable Swamp and the Fantasy of MAGA, and Stephen Moore, informal White House advisor and author of Trumponomics. I don't think I need to explain who's on what side. So, David, let me start with you. The Bloomberg headline today said today's big miss is a shock and, quote, the dawn of a long forecast slowdown.
Well, I think 1 month doesn't mean anything. They get revised all the time. It's a lot of noise. But I look at the trend. Trump's had 26 monthly report cards now from the BLS, average monthly gain 199,000 jobs. The last 26 months of Obama, average gain 215,000 jobs. There's been no acceleration. There's no Trump boom. The only thing that's happening is the business cycle is getting older and older, and we're near the end. In other words, we're at month 116. The record's 119 in the 1990s when it was a much better economic environment. So we are heading for a recession, and we have had policies that are upside down in terms of where we should be going. Trump inherited a $700 billion deficit for this year. That's bad 10 years into a recovery.
Oh, yeah.
He added $500 billion for his tax cut, $80 billion of defense, $60 billion of domestic, all the disaster aid that wasn't financed. And so we're going to borrow $1.2 trillion this year at the
end of a boom.
At the end of a boom, at the top of a cycle. Now, we're going to have a recession. Nobody has outlawed recessions. There is no acceleration. I just point out that other than the sugar high of the second quarter last year, real final sales for the 8 quarters under Trump are up 2.5% under the last.
All right, you got a lot in here. And Steve, you know what? Look, he's right. $1.2 trillion. You're not supposed to be in this situation when things are good. When things are bad is when you're supposed to be borrowing all the money. But no, that's not the way things are. What's your response?
Well, I'll certainly agree with you that things are good. I mean, my goodness, Aaron, it is true. This was a very lousy number in terms of new jobs created. Yep. But let's not bury the headline here that we have the lowest unemployment rate for women in, 50 years. We have 7 million more jobs today than workers. And by the way, I think you both know
I love the use of the women headline.
Yeah, that's great. We love it. By the way, Black and Hispanic unemployment is also at a record low. But, one of the problems we have, David, with the economy, as you know, is it's booming so much that literally ask any employer, just about any state in the country, ask them what their biggest problem is. It's finding workers. Basically, what we're finding right now in terms of the economy is we just can't find the workers to fill all the jobs we have. 7 million jobs surplus. That's more than the entire population of Indiana.
Okay.
By the way, David, I've known you a long time. I respect you, but you've called 7 of the last 2 recessions. I remember when you first started talking about your doom and gloom in the mid-'80s, the Dow was at 2,500. Today it's at 25,000.
Well, the point is we do have recessions. They haven't been outlawed. We're at the very end of a long recovery, the weakest one in history. We have now got this enormous deficit build up. We have the Fed finally, belatedly trying to normalize a little bit. We have a world trade economy that's slowing down dramatically. China was down 10% first 2 months. Korea is down 19%. So we are going to have a recession. It will come next year or the year after, no doubt about it, and we will have a $2 trillion deficit. We will be adding $10 trillion or $20 trillion to the national debt.
Well, I don't even want to. These numbers
make
me sick. They make me sick as a citizen and as a parent. But you actually use words, David, to describe what you're talking about. Right. What you say is an assault on this country's future. Delusional, unhinged madman. That's used to describe the president. It's not a psychological prognosis or diagnosis, I'm sorry, but this is your view of his treating of the economy.
Yes, of course. How else could you describe someone who comes in with a $2 trillion tax cut, unfinanced? Most of it went to corporations who are using it to buy back stock and do M&A deals. We have not had any acceleration in real business investment. As a matter of fact, in the last 4 or 5 months, orders have been down. So what we did was we spent $180 billion this year on the rate cut and other business reductions. We got a $20 billion gain in business investment. So you're going to spend $180 billion you don't have on a credit card to get $20 billion of
It's a pretty bad
investment?
return on investment.
Yeah, terrible.
Steve, your response to
Well, look,
delusional,
I mean,
unhinged madman?
Maybe I'm looking at a few different statistics than David is because, look, the business investment is healthy. It was 7% last year, year over year. That was one of the strongest numbers we've had in a decade. Look, I will agree with David Stockman on something. It is true, David, that the economy is slowing down. We had 4% growth in the middle of 2018, and we had 2.5% growth in the fourth quarter of 2018. And now this quarter is looking, Aaron, maybe 1 to 1.5%. That's a slowdown. But here's where I disagree with. This is a key point. I think the Fed is just killing the economy right now. Those interest rate hikes that took place in September and December have just pulled the oxygen out of the economy at a time, by the way, we had 4% growth, no inflation, the lowest unemployment ever. Why did they do
I'm going to
that?
leave it there, but I'm just going to say
Wait
you're
a minute.
going to bet on a tax cut
Why
to
would
cause
they
growth.
raise rates
Corporate
when the
tax
economy is
receipts-
so good?
Corporate tax receipts are down almost 20% as economic growth is coming down. That's just not the way you would learn in macroeconomics.
But wait a minute. But Steve, we cannot be beating up on the Fed when it's belatedly trying to get the interest rate above the inflation rate. We've had 10 years of negative real interest rates.
Why would you raise interest rates when there's no inflation in the economy? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I don't know what no inflation you're talking about. The running average in the last 6 months.
The last 3 months, the consumer price index has been negative and commodities fallen by 10%.
That's cherry picking. The last 6 months, CPI is 2.2%.
No, it isn't.
And besides that, you can't have an interest rate in the federal funds that's barely positive.
You were the budget director, David. It was the economy, according to the Congressional Budget Office, can be $6 trillion larger over the next decade than before when we passed that tax cut. $6 trillion additional GDP, I think that's a pretty good investment.
Well, I don't think it adds up to much in a $200 trillion GDP over 10 years.
But I mean, $6 trillion is a quarter of the level of the current national debt. I mean, I know I may be one of the few to have an issue with this now, but I'm telling you, it makes me sick to my stomach.
That's $1.5 trillion more revenue.
Thank you both. And next, President Trump claims Paul Manafort's judge says there's no